Good evening. Welcome to Silver Slumbers. I'm going to help you get those soothing Z's that you deserve. If you are enjoying what you're hearing, down below in the description box, if you'd like to buy me a coffee, it would be really appreciated as it does help me in the channel out. And please consider subscribing. It'll help me reach the goal of 1,000 subscribers. I thank you in advance. In today's video, I'm going to be reading True Trucker Stories, Volume 1. So, in order to feel more relaxed and fall asleep much more easily, we are going to do the 4-7-8 breathing technique. Breathe in for 4 seconds, hold your breath for 7 seconds, and breathe out for 8 seconds. 4, 7, 8. Breathe in 4 seconds, hold breath 7 seconds, breathe out 8 seconds. 4, 7, 8. Sit back, relax, and close those eyes. And remember, don't get lost in the dark. Well, this was creepy. I pull into a Purdue plant. I drop my empty trailer to go park where they allow bobtails to sit, right next to a nice little pond. My pickup was in 12 hours, so I do my PTI and lay down in the bunk. At about 3 in the morning, I hear something tapping on my passenger side window. I get up, look out the window, expecting to see someone. Maybe a driver asking for a lumbar check, but no one was there. Alright, maybe I'm just hearing things. So I go back to lay down. As soon as my head hits the pillow, I hear the tapping again, except this time, it was on my driver's side. Same thing as before. I jump out to look at the window, but nothing's there. Double lock my doors just in case, and open my side hatchet so I can hear what's going on outside. After about 15 minutes, I can hear a very light splat, splat, splat going along the driver's side of the truck. I slowly get up, planning to look out my window at the exact moment whoever it is knocks on my door. And then I hear a thud coming from the roof of the cab. I stopped, grabbed my tire thumper off its hook, and readied myself for whatever the hell is going on. Then, an effing goose falls off from the top of my truck and lands on my hood. It stands up, waddles back and forth, and looks at me. As we make eye contact again, the tapping on my door starts again. I say F it, and throw open the side door, and there's another damn goose waddling away with all the speed it can manage, honking like a 5-year-old who just found the horn on his new bike. The pond I parked next to had a ton of them just messing around. Needless to say, it was a hard time to sleep that night because every couple of minutes, these damn geese would just peck at my door or land on the cab and waddle away. I parked off the next exit ramp at about 3 in the morning for my 10th hour. The moon was full and high. I spotted an unmistakably human figure in a nearby cut cornfield. A little spooky, but I just wrote it off as an old-timer, putting up a scarecrow for the little grandkids. Started watching a few YouTube videos before turning in, and out in the corner of my vision, I thought I saw movement. I shut my lights off to get a good look. I saw the figure, but nothing else. I couldn't be sure, but it looked like maybe it was a different spot. Maybe a little closer even. I was definitely feeling a little bit spooked. Highway was devoid of anyone besides a car passing every 10 minutes or so. I didn't want to, but I had to jump out and pee. I considered a bottle, but I told myself I was being childish. I took a look at the figure. was just right there as it should be. I hopped out, walked between my truck and trailer, and started leaking. Every fiber of my being wanted to look. I told myself I was just being foolish, but I couldn't help it. I looked at it. The field was empty. The figure wasn't there anymore. My stomach dropped. I pinched off and jumped back in. I took off down the highway. I didn't give a crap about a violation. I stopped 40 minutes up the road at a well-lit, at very full loves. Haven't stopped at a ramp since. Not sure if this is a creepy story, but it's definitely scary. My father was a truck driver in East Africa in the 80s and early 90s. During the years leading up to the Rwandan Genocide, my father was passing through Rwanda. He reached a checkpoint and was forcibly removed from his truck at gunpoint. Apparently, he looked like he belonged to one of the Tutsi tribe, and they put him in a cage with other Tutsi prisoners. He tried communicating that he isn't Rwandan, but no one spoke the same language as him. Every night, they would take about 5 people from the cage and slaughter them in front of him. After the 3rd night, he saw a man that spoke a little bit of Swahili, which my dad spoke, and told him that he is not Rwandan, and showed him his ID. Somehow that guy got him out, and he handed the keys to his truck, and he was on his way. My dad drove a truck between Edinburgh and London and tells the story often. He was driving through the motorway and looked to his right and saw a woman with a Miss Trunchbull bun, as he describes it, staring at him with a terrified expression from a car next to him. Before he really knows how to react, the car pulls up to the next exit, and my dad, although shaken, carries on. About half an hour later, a different car with a different driver pulls alongside my dad with the same woman in the passenger seat with the same expression in her face. My dad thinks, F this, and plans to pull over to the next service to report as if even if it was nothing or a misunderstanding. Better safe than sorry, right? Anyway, the car disappears before he can get any details such as plates, etc. And he thinks that there is no point of calling the police with literally no details as he carries on driving. Literally, 4 hours later, almost in London, yet another car pulls along him with the same woman, same Miss Trunchbull hair, same terrified expression, except this time, she appears to be screaming at my dad through the window. So my dad pulls over to the lay-bay and calls the police. Apparently, they've received 3 other phone calls from the same woman, car, in the same area within the last few minutes. It's unfortunate that the anticlimactic has never heard anything more about it. But he didn't see her again, though. And although he kept an eye out on the news, he didn't see anything about it. Hopefully, it's just a giant coincidence. Who knows? Around 2006, I was driving flatbed, picked up a load of construction material, drywall, roofing, don't remember, but it was pre-packaged in boxes and I don't remember having to use strap protectors on the load. In rural Tennessee, memory is foggy now, but I want to say that it was between Memphis and Nashville, but closer to the intersection of Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, these state lines. Tarp required, so I strapped everything down, tarped the load, and left the shipper. About 5 miles down the road, in the middle of nowhere, woods on 2-lane road, I noticed my tarp flapping in the wind. Found a wide shoulder and pulled over to fix it. I realized that I was just flat, did a shitty job tarping the load, and decided to redo it on the side of the road. Undo all the bungee straps, drag tarps off, roll them back up, climb on the load, and start unrolling the tarps again. And I see a guy walking down the same side of the road that I'm on. He was coming towards my truck. I don't think anything about it other than to keep an eye on him because I'm in the middle of nowhere and to continue on what I'm doing. About the time I have tarps set in place and climbing down to start hooking the bungee straps back on, this dude is getting close enough that I'm now paying more attention to him than I am to tarping my load. I grab my winch bar and set it on the trailer where I'm working on, just in case. 8-pound solid metal bar, about 4 feet long, tarped to the blunt point on one and unhollow on the other, used for tightening straps and chains, etc. The guy gets to me, and the first thing I noticed was his hair. It's like a mullet, but it's patchy as F, like he tried to cut down his own hair and had a seizure in the process and just said, F it, good enough to party. The next thing I noticed were his eyes, which I can only describe as off. Like they were clear. I didn't think he was drunk or high or anything, but it also gave me the distinct impression that the elevator didn't go all the way up. Clothes were dirty and not well maintained. With dirty white tennis shoes, because I remember he didn't have laces on one shoe and the tongue was noticeably out of place. He stops by me. He stares at me, waits until I acknowledge him, and he just said, I've got a long walk. I'm like, yeah, man, you do. We're in the middle of nowhere, making it clear that there's no ride to be had here. He nods, starts walking by me, continuing on his way, stops at about the driver door of my truck, and turns around, comes back to me, and repeats himself, I've got a long walk. At this point, I explained that I can't get him a ride, insurance and all that. I apologize for not being able to help him out, and he seems to accept this, turns around, and leaves. I waited for him to get a little farther away from my truck, and I started working on finishing my tarp. I still kept an eye out for him, and he kept walking away from me. As I'm putting on the last of the bungee straps, I look over to check where he's at, and he's turning around, heading towards back at me. Now about 100 yards in front of my truck, and coming back my way. He looks like he's talking on the cell phone. He has his hand up to his face, and I can barely make out what his mouth is moving. His other hand was waving like he was having a conversation with someone. I finished with the straps, grabbed my winch, and I'm climbing into my truck as he's about 10 yards away from me now. As soon as I'm in the cab, I lock the doors and set the winch bar on the passenger's seat just in case. I look at the guy and realize he is not talking on the phone. He's talking to his effing hand. And now I'm nervous because he doesn't look like he's having a nice, pleasant conversation. It looks like he was more in an angry conversation. I cranked the truck up to the full gear and just pulled out. Didn't look for traffic or anything. As I passed him, he's just looking at me, still holding his hand on his face with these dead eyes, just staring at me. Gave me the creeps. About the time I hit the 5th or 6th gear, I look into the mirror and there's no one there. He's gone. I was driving through eastern Washington on some state roads. There were no rest stops or cities, but I had done the routes enough to know that there were these massive dirt areas, approximately 40 miles, where you can park safely away from the road. I decided to call it a night and close my blinds and lay down to watch something on my phone. Roughly about an hour later, I hear someone trying to open my driver's side door. I haven't heard any vehicles on the side of the road the whole time that I'm parked here, but I get up to take a peek outside the curtains. As I'm looking out into the blackness of the driver's side window, I hear them trying to pry the passenger side door open. I peek down from the top of the curtain, but I can't see anything, so I start the truck and kick the lights on. I'm fairly freaked at this point, so I still am not opening the curtains, but peeking through the gaps. Nothing. Nobody standing either side of the doors or parked within the sight line. I take a deep breath and close the sleeper curtains too, because for some reason, that's what's going to make me things feel better, right? After laying down and convincing myself that somehow everything blew against the truck and only made a sound to the doors, it was fairly windy outside and a lot of flat ground. I hear what sounds like someone trying to pry the door open through the vents of the sleeper. The door handle starts clicking again, and the truck starts shifting like someone was climbing on it. I hit the little alarm button on the sleeper, hoping to spook him off, but it does nothing but adds to the noise of the door handles, fingers tapping on the windows and chassis, and the hiss of the air coming out of the suspension. Then suddenly, it stops. A few moments where I can actually hear myself breathing and my heart pounding before I can hear another truck approaching and then drive by. I spent the next few hours waiting for whatever was to come next, but it never did. In the morning, I couldn't find any footprints or damage to my truck, but on every window, there were tiny, human-looking fingerprints, like a toddler had licked their hand and stuck it to my window over and over and over. I used to drive a truck in northern Manitoba. There's a road in the northeast. You can drive for several hours and see very few vehicles. This road is quite flat and straight and stretches. Of course, this is deep enough to be in the brush. One day, I saw something cross the road in the distance. Very large, easily past the hood of my truck, but not long like a moose or elk, just tall. It disappeared into the bush, and as I drove by the spot, the hair on the back of my neck stood up. I heard days later about a tow truck driver describing on the radio of his encounter with a similar creature, only he was much more clear that he spotted Bigfoot. This guy went to some length to explain that he didn't want people thinking that he was crazy, but he was sure on what he saw. I asked an Aboriginal client of mine in a nearby community and said that the elders spoke of them as commonly as the same way they spoke of other animals. They don't know what they saw that day, but I'm certain it wasn't a bear, moose, deer, or elk. I just don't know what the hell it was. Tell me, he wasn't crazy, right? Not a truck driver, but I spent the last 4 years driving every day, night, for work. I was in a fairly rural part of Mississippi, somewhere between Clarksdale and Greenwood. Important to know that it's a 2-lane highway, the 250-mile drive home. The weather had turned pretty sour as I was leaving Clarksdale. I called my wife and told her that there was high wind adversaries and very possible tornado threats through the Delta, and I'd call her back as soon as I made it to the safe area again. I had already been working for 14 hours. When I got in the truck, so I had ate dinner and grabbed some coffee to stay awake and alert. Now, if you've never driven through the flat farmland at night for hundreds of miles, it's very fatiguing and spooky without inclement weather. I have driven maybe 30 miles out into the farmland when it started to hail. The hail started bouncing off my truck. Being a Mississippi native, I knew in July, hail meant tornado. I pull up to the side. I'm in the middle of nowhere with no lights to be seen, no cars in front and or behind me, and started looking for the storm/tornado I believe is approaching. I roll the passenger window down and shine a bright flashlight into the night. Nothing there. Turn to the driver's side, and this guy has his face pressing against the glass, grinning from ear to ear. I screamed and he was gone. I slammed the truck and drive and took off. We have all the time running cameras on our trucks. I got to the first safe place to stop and call my wife. I didn't want to scare her, so I didn't mention the guy or the hailstorm. I did, however, pull the SD card and check the cameras. And I promise you, this guy never popped up in front or the rear of my cameras. I've always played it off as my imagination. I will say I don't drive through the Delta dark anymore if I don't absolutely have to. As a crew guy of an off-road racing team in Baja California, Mexico, I got to test drive some rigs and trucks. So technically, I'm a truck driver. We were driving down south along Sea of Cortez with a buddy at night at this 4-hour dirt road of Gonzaga, which is pretty much in the middle of effing nowhere in the desert, and we see lights of a car behind coming down fast and now effectively tailing us, and the dude had a bar mount headlights on top, or what it seemed like, which are super bright. It's normal, or was, that locals and gringos get wasted in the nearest, now former, due COVID, spring breaker town, and then go down this road super fast to test their rigs since there's no police there. So I waved him off to get the guy to keep his lights low since he's blinding us. But he isn't slowing down a bit, nor turned his roof lights off. And it was dangerous. It was super dark on the road. Finally, near a curve near the end of the shore, I found a spot to bail off the road without crashing and see lights passing by us super fast and going straight to the curve. And we were like, that's it. He's going to crash down to the sea. But the lights didn't fall and kept going straight into the beach and the sea, and then pitch up abruptly into the night sky and disappeared. We didn't say a word for a minute or so, and then my buddy goes, "Did you see that?" And I say, "Did the effing truck just flew?" We didn't talk about it with anyone, as simply it just didn't make sense to talk about it, or with anyone else when we arrived back. My father told me this story maybe 1,000 times. My family, as well as a couple of uncles, my oldest cousin went on a trip from Mexico City when I was barely a year old. Back home in the middle of the night. The good old days when you could just travel at night. Our car broke down, and a police car quickly came to help us out. There were 3 policemen in the car, and the chief offered to take my dad to the nearest gas station where he could find a mechanic, and told the other 2 officers to stay with our car. My dad says they seemed absolutely not pleased with the order until the chief told them, "Don't worry, there's a woman and 2 children." That seemed to calm the 2 officers down. Driving to the gas station to the police car, my dad asked the chief, "What was that all about?" The chief told him that there were many accidents in the part of the road. That's why they were able to find our car so quickly. All accidents involved with young men traveling without female or young children. Those who survived said that they crashed because they saw a very, very beautiful woman standing next to the road. But once they came close to her, she turned out to be just a rotting corpse staring at them. And they crashed because they were paralyzed by fear. Not a truck driver, but I had a college teammate in Miami to tell a story that he swears on this day. He and his girlfriend were making a drive into Annapolis late at night on a 2-lane road through the Everglades and had been in a line of cars behind an 18-wheeler for multiple miles. She fell asleep, and he was surfing for something to listen to on the radio. Only one station came in clearly enough to be tolerable, so he gave it a listen. The DJ came on and said something along the lines of, "The stars are extra bright in the Everglades tonight. If you're driving through there, pull off and take a look." He said he normally wouldn't even think about it, but for some reason, he felt compelled to that night. He woke up his girlfriend. She was annoyed and didn't want to, but he convinced her it was worth it. They stopped and just took a look at the stars for maybe 5 to 10 minutes. He said it was the most amazing sky he has ever seen. They get back on the road and drove across for another few minutes and came across a massive accident. The truck that they were following behind had jackknifed and took out a handful of vehicles that were following. He said that there were multiple fatalities and have never been able to find a news story about it to confirm. This probably may be around 2005. They most likely would have been involved in the accident if it was not for that random DJ on the radio to come out to say, "Please exit the vehicle and start stargazing." I got a few. Being stalked by, my gut says a skinwalker outside of Cedar City, but I've told that one elsewhere on Reddit. One of the worst was when I was parked into a dirt turnout in Arizona desert between Cameron and Page for the night. This turned out to be in Navajo country, I believe. About 2 in the morning, I woke up to scratching at the window of my sleeper. This went on for about 15 minutes. I'm sitting there in the dark, scared to death, wondering what the F is happening, and I'm holding onto my Bowie knife in my right hand. After it ended, I waited for another 15 minutes or so before I opened the curtain. I looked out to my windows and I couldn't see anything outside, and I was still the only one parked there. I got out the next morning, and all I found were some footprints coming to the truck, and eventually walking back to the desert. Having parked there since, I always stop at the small truck stop in Cameron now. For those who are wanting the skinwalker story outside of Cedar City, the company I drove for picked up PVC pipe and cast iron pipe at a place not far from town. I had to pick up there several times after dark when no one else was there, because it's a 24-hour place for us to pick up since it's all drop and hook loads. But every time I've been there after dark, I can hear something groaning like sounds behind the trailers and the sounds of tapping on the trailers. There's no flagpole or anything like that nearby. Second time I loaded there at night, I noticed the same thing, but this time there was a dark silhouette of somebody standing there between the 2 trailers while I was throwing straps. After that, I quit throwing straps at night. If there's no drivers hooking up, I park in the street outside right under the street light, and I wait until daybreak. Whether or not it's a skinwalker, not for sure, or I don't know, and I'd rather not find out. I work at the Nevada nuclear testing site, decommissioning old buildings. How much time do you have? One of the creepiest days when I was sent to end a dump load of non-hazard material to the general landfill, which I had never been to before. Somehow I missed a turn and ended up at an arms gate with machine guns pointed at me. I was very uncomfortable. Once I explained myself that was a mistake, I was quite hastily turned around. Still not sure exactly where my turn was. A very nondescript desert road was what I was looking for. I headed back. I turned to the next dirt road. I came to end at the Seaton crater, went and smoked a cigarette on the observation deck, all by my lonesome. My hands were still shaking from the run and the armed guards. Another was delivering to a hazmat load to Area 25. They had begun using robots to guard the area. They were still in beta testing, and someone may have been effing with me. But the dang thing perceived my truck as a threat and blocked my ability to move. I went inside the building, and 15 minutes later, it had moved on. A few years back, I was driving home after a shift. It was 3 or 4 in the morning, and I was tired but not exhausted. It was a desert state route in the middle of nowhere, and it's pretty common not to see a single car during a 30-mile trip. I drive this road multiple times a week. It's mostly open fields and some farmlands through the 30-mile stretch. This particular night, it was cold, but the sky was clear, like no clouds or anything. And I actually love nights like this because you can see the stars so well without the light pollution. Anyway, after about halfway back home, I came over this hill to a 2 or 3 mile straight stretch. A huge, dark object about the length of a pickup truck, but far rounder and thicker. It catches my attention as it's just hovering about 50 feet in the air, 50 or 60 feet off the road, over a farm field. There's a very bright red light coming from the side or bottom. I couldn't tell exactly where it originated from because it was so bright. As I was going 50 miles per hour past it, I only had a few seconds to look at it, but the image is burned into my mind. I have no idea what it was. I wanted to turn around, but I was kind of freaked. I'm sure alien life exists somewhere, but as for visiting our planet, I don't know. If I ever have to paint a picture of what I thought a UFO would look like, I painted wherever the F I saw that night. Unfortunately, I haven't seen anything odd over that area since that night. Airline pilot here. That kind of counts. In the air, probably the craziest thing I've ever heard was a distress call of a small general aviation aircraft going down. This was around 2014 in the PNW. He had just blown a cylinder head and oil was shooting out all over the windshield. You can hear the panic in his voice as he radioed out that he couldn't see and that he was trying to report his position to a few airliners so they can try to relay it to an ATC. I checked the news that night, and he actually died in the crash. It was a pretty eerie feeling that we heard the last words of the pilot, fighting for his life, while we were just cruising along above the clouds at 35,000 feet, completely powerless to do anything other than just reach him over the radio. Had a pretty wild encounter with some scarred, toothless meth tweakers on layover in Ciudad Juarez, if anyone's interested in that. Edit. I've flown to some odd destinations, but one of the creepiest was Ciudad Juarez. Me and 2 flight attendants were bored on El Paso layover, so we decided to get some drinks at around 11 p.m. We drank until the bar closed at 2. On our way out, we asked the bartender if there was anything else that was still open. Not unless you want to go to Ciudad Juarez, he joked. I looked at the flight attendants. We shrugged, nodded, and said, okay. He was shocked that we took him seriously. We walked a short distance back to the hotel, grabbed our passports, and set out for Mexico. Before we left, I asked the flight attendants, both of them were women, if they were sure that they were okay with this. Yeah, sure, as long as you're coming too. Liquid courage had officially overruled any fears of being kidnapped or beheaded, and off we went. We walked 20 minutes south of the border. El Paso was completely dead quiet, aside from a few homeless people. Some of them stumbling around and clearly under the influence of drugs. but none of them bothered us. We reached the Mexican border, and the guards took an extra second to look at these 3 crazy gringos before waving us through. It was close to 3 in the morning at this point, and we were 3 mid-20-year-olds wandering around the streets of Ciudad Juarez at night. I'm not sure how much you know about CJ, but it isn't exactly safe at night, especially for non-locals. The streets are pretty empty, and not a single bar was open, but everyone we passed stopped mid-conversation and stared at us as we walked by. The flight attendants were getting nervous, and we were walking so close to me that they were brushing against each other up me. After determining that everything within the realistic distance of the border was closed, we turned around to head back to the United States. We'd probably been in CJ for about another hour, and somehow managed to navigate down to the dark and desert streets into the same strip that we entered on. By this point, we were close enough to the border that we're there on a few streets with lights that were still on. All of a sudden, 2 locals stumble out of the dark sidewalks into the street, which we were walking down in the middle of. As they came into the light, all 3 of us jumped at what we saw. A man and a woman, both with scarred faces, hunched backs, excessive sweat, ripped clothing, and missing teeth. They were grinning as they approached us. The man was half speaking Spanish, half laughing. The startle factor of their approach combined with their appearance stand out as one of the biggest jump scares in my life. After realizing that they were trying to kill us, I figured, screw it. We came this far. Why not throw a Hail Mary? To my own disbelief, I actually tried to communicate with the man and asked if he knew if any bars were open. By this point, the flight attendants were so terrified that each one of them latched themselves into my arms. In any situation other than the one we were currently in, I have looked pretty cool. The man simply smiled, pointed behind him, and said, "Por allá," over there. There was a motel with all the lights turned off, except for a steady red light in front of a balcony and a light flickering from inside a room on the 2nd floor. One of the flight attendants turned and said to my ear, "N-O-F, no. We need to leave now." I thanked the man and the woman for their time, and we hightailed back to the United States border. They gave us a thorough questioning, and rightfully so, as 1 man and 2 women crossed into the United States at 4 in the morning reeks of human trafficking. Weirdly, the number of people huddled in the streets of El Paso had doubled, and we sped walk back to our hotel. That layover definitely takes the cake for the creepiest thing to happen in the middle of nowhere. My uncle is a truck driver in Guatemala. Small town, just a single road that passes through. I used to love sitting outside at night on the hammock, listening to his chilling stories. I'll start with one of the scariest ones. Number 1, can you see them? My uncle said that he hired a guy from town to help drive late night shifts. Story was that the guy had somehow managed to burn a house down as a kid and had since claimed that he can see the dead. He would occasionally swerve on the roads at night over nothing, or worse. My uncle said that he would just sit around when the guy would say, "I see a little girl in the swing." My aunt confirmed it, said that he would say things like that often. Apparently he learned to live with it, or some kind of scary third world crap. Number 2, the cave. My uncle said that one night he was sleeping above the trailer bed when suddenly, in the distance, he could see a small light approaching. As it got closer, he had the chilling realization he described seeing a really, really old wrinkly woman who had held a candle, draped in dark clothing. He said her nails were so long that they curled. She walked into the cave opening and disappeared. My uncle said that he noped out of there really fast. Number 3, the horse. My uncle often likes to talk about spirits. He said one night while sleeping, a giant rabid horse tried to climb into his truck. It would rocket back and forth, and the truck weighs an ungodly amount. He said when the rocking stopped, he jumped in and left. This is just the stories that I have from my uncle. I have also experienced paranormal stuff, and so has my family. Bringing on the back windows with no one there, lights flashing at 3 in the morning, and countless others. Guatemala is no joke. Now, I'm a big fella, and I don't know how this would have gone down if I wasn't. In Colorado, there's a rest area that's part of the original Eisenhower highway system, and it's nestled beneath the freeway itself. The original car parking is right next to the facilities, but the more recent truck parking is tucked along the on and off ramps further away from the facilities. My story arises from being a rookie, needing to take a crap around 3 in the morning, and being the furthest parking spot from the toilets. This part of the mountains represents more wildlife than human, so the main source of light is the Milky Way, and the ambience of cicadas being occasionally drowned out by cars rolling overhead. I immediately freaked out by my surroundings, because this is the most atypical pit stop that I've ever made, and decided to call my friend for passive comfort. I described my situation and remind him to share my GPS location with them in case anything happens. He says I'm being a little baby, but he'll gladly hold my hand to the bathroom. The half-mile hike to the latrine starts with me walking between thick brush line and through the parking lot of scattered cars, scanning for any activity life amongst these 4. I see none and pray that I don't. With this being a partial historical monument to the highway system, the building is stretched out in order to display murals and kiosks memorializing this engineering achievement. All I feel are the eyes of the photos are staring at me, and my bowels are gaping to remain control. The closer I get to the men's bathroom, the louder the sound of running water gets. But I don't have time to see if wildlife or Jason Voorhees pop out of the creek next to the building. Bursting into the first stall, I see crap displayed all over the stall. It was disgusting. The second stall seemed to be a follow-up of the first stall, Jackson Pollock tribute. Thankfully, the final stall was a blank canvas, and I let my friend know that I made it to the bathroom safely, and that I'll call him back in a bit. With the deed done and my hands washed, I'm about to leave the bathroom when I heard something outside the door. Someone was muttering to themselves, barely audible about the rolling creek. I reached for the small of my back, reaching for a gun that I so desperately wished was there. Not sure about what was going to happen, I slammed the door outward and barely missed on what was making a noise. A smaller, bewildered man is reaching in his jacket while completely frozen by me, towering over him with the illusion of me reaching a gun. Oh, I'm sorry, he whispers, while briskly stepping aside for me to move by. I stared him down until the door closed behind him. I transitioned from a brisk wall to a full sprint, like a little baby, until I make it back to my truck. I find a gear before my butt hits the seat. I call my lifeline to let them know what happened, and he laughs at what he thinks was a botched old school rest area hookup. Either way, I have made sure I no longer have to reach for my fake gun. If you made it this far, I want to thank you for tuning in. I hope you enjoy these true trucker stories. Please remember, consider subscribing for more videos like this and helping me reach the goal of 1,000 subscribers. If you are asleep, well, maybe you can hear me in your dream world, and I'll let you listen to the rain. Enjoy the slumber world.